He mocked my infertility to her. While I paid $14,000 for treatments alone, he leaked my medical records to his coworker, joked I was dried up, and said real kids would come later. They planned a secret pregnancy using our savings for her baby shower. He told me, she can actually do what a wife should. So I called her Obgyn and told them. I still remember the moment my hands started shaking so badly I could barely scroll. It was 11:47 p.m. on a Tuesday night, and my husband's iPad kept pinging with notifications while he was asleep next to me. Normally, I'd ignore it. But that night, something inside me just shifted. I had just come home from another failed fertility appointment, our third round of IUI, our fourth negative result, and he didn't even bother to ask how it went. I opened his iPad. Messages popped up instantly. Her name was Kayla. The baby bottle emoji hit me in the throat like a punch. The first message I saw read, "She's probably crying herself to sleep again. You'd think after 3 years she'd accept she's barren." Then his reply, "Yeah, well, I only married her for stability. You're the one I actually want kids with. Real ones." I don't even know how long I sat there staring at the screen. The words didn't look real. Real ones, like the kids I'd been bleeding and injecting myself for, weren't real. But the worst part came when I scrolled up. There were attachments, screenshots of my medical portal. My hormone levels, my test results, even a note from my doctor explaining my low ovarian reserve. He sent them to her like a goddamn joke. Her AMH is basically 0, he'd written. I told her it means she's dried up, but she still wants to try. Face with tears of joy, Kayla replied with, "Good thing you've got a fertile one now, face blowing a kiss. Our baby will have your eyes." My vision blurred. I dropped the iPad. My husband shifted beside me in bed, mumbled something about turning off the light, and rolled over. I just stared at his back. I didn't even cry. I just went numb. It hit me all at once. The way he stopped going to appointments with me, the sudden work trips, the mysterious credit card charges I assumed were for home renovations. Turns out they were for her baby shower. He used our savings, money I set aside for IVF, to buy this woman a designer diaper bag. When I confronted him the next morning, he didn't deny it. He just said, "Because she can actually do what a wife should." That's when something cold and precise settled in me. Not grief, not rage, something else. I asked him one last question. "Does she even know what you've done to me?" He smirked and said, "She knows everything. She's not jealous like you." That's when I decided, if she wanted to play perfect fertile mommy, she was going to learn exactly what kind of man she was carrying a child for. So I picked up my phone, looked up her Obgyn's number, and calmly said, "Hi, this is about a patient named Kayla Turner. I think there's something you need to know about her pregnancy." And that call, it changed everything. When I met Ryan, he seemed like the kind of man every mom wants their daughter to marry: stable job, good manners, calm voice. I was 29, recently out of a messy breakup, and exhausted from starting over. He was 32, an engineer, and always talking about building a future. I thought he meant with me. We got married 2 years later, after he proposed during a trip to Asheville. I remember he said, "You're my piece." I thought it was the most romantic thing ever. Now I know it meant I was just his emotional placeholder, quiet, predictable, and safe. The first year of marriage was great. We bought a small house outside of Charlotte, painted the guest room yellow for the future baby, and opened a joint savings account for fertility or kids. It felt like we were planning our life together. Then came the trying. Month after month of negative tests. I'd cry in the bathroom with the shower running so he wouldn't hear. He'd pat my shoulder and say, "It'll happen when it's meant to." But by year 2, his patience turned into jokes. When I started seeing a fertility specialist, he stopped coming to appointments. "You've got it handled," he'd say. The truth was, he didn't want to face the fact that my numbers were bad. My AMH was 0.3, low for my age. The doctor explained we might need IVF soon. Ryan's reaction, "How much will that cost?" Not "How are you feeling?" Not "We'll get through this." Just money. Still, I pressed on. I researched, changed my diet, injected myself with hormones every night while he sat in the living room watching football. He barely looked up. And that's when he started working late. At first, I believed him. He was a project lead, always on deadlines. But the changes were subtle. New cologne, gym twice a week, password on his phone. When I asked, he laughed and said, "You're paranoid." I told myself I was just stressed from the fertility meds. I even blamed myself for the distance growing between us. Maybe I wasn't fun anymore. Maybe I was too obsessed with getting pregnant. The first time I heard the name Kayla, it was from him, casually, like a coworker. Kayla brought cupcakes for the team. Kayla's hilarious, she should do stand-up. Then it became, Kayla's going through a breakup, she really needs a friend. I didn't think much of it. I trusted him. He was my husband. What I didn't know was that while I was sitting in a waiting room full of crying babies and hopeful couples, praying for a miracle, he was sitting in a bar with her, talking about how hard it is being with someone who can't give you kids. He told her I was emotionally fragile, obsessed with motherhood, and too uptight. By the time I realized something was wrong, the damage was already done. He had already started transferring money from our savings, and she was already pregnant. But not everything was as it seemed. Because when I made that call to her obgyn, I learned something Ryan didn't know, something that turned all his plans upside down. When I called Kayla's obgyn, I didn't expect to speak to anyone. I just wanted to plant a seed. But the receptionist, a woman named Dana, sounded flustered the moment I mentioned Kayla's name. I told her calmly, "I'm calling because my husband has been sharing my private medical information with your patient, and I believe she may be involved in something unethical." There was silence on the other end. Then Dana asked, "Can I put you on hold?" 5 minutes later, I was speaking to the doctor herself. She didn't confirm or deny anything, obviously, HIPAA laws, but her tone told me enough. When I hinted that Kayla might be pregnant by a married man, the doctor sighed. "Thank you for calling," she said quietly. "That's useful to know." That's when it clicked. Ryan didn't even know if he was the father. But that wasn't the only secret. Over the next few days, I started digging. I pulled our joint bank statements, checked credit card history, and logged into our shared cloud account. He'd been using our savings for months, not just on her, but on a rental apartment in uptown Charlotte. Lease signed under his name, 2 bedrooms. I drove there one Saturday morning. My hands were shaking the whole way. I didn't even know what I was going to do, confront her, see him. I just needed to see it with my own eyes. When I arrived, her car was parked outside, a white Honda with a baby on board sticker. I sat there for 10 minutes before I saw them. Ryan came out carrying a bag of groceries, laughing. She followed behind him, visibly pregnant, maybe 5 or 6 months. He leaned down, kissed her forehead, and rested his hand on her stomach. My stomach turned. I didn't cry this time. I just drove away, gripping the wheel so hard my nails cut into my palms. That night when he came home, I pretended everything was normal. I made dinner. We ate in silence. He scrolled through his phone while I mentally replayed what I'd seen. Then I said casually, "You know, my doctor called today." He froze mid-bite. "About what?" "I guess there was a mix-up with some medical records," I said, watching his face. "Apparently my private files were accessed multiple times from an outside device." He blinked. "What are you talking about?" "Oh, don't worry," I said. "They're investigating it now." He went pale. For the next few days, he acted paranoid, locking his phone, taking calls outside, muttering under his breath. He even asked, "Did you call anyone?" I just smiled and said, "Why should I have?" That's when the guilt act started. Suddenly, he wanted to reconnect. He brought home flowers, suggested we start over, and even mentioned therapy. But I knew what he was really doing. He was scared. And he had every reason to be. Because the obgyn had called me back. What she told me wasn't illegal, but it was devastating. Kayla had listed Ryan as the father on her prenatal paperwork, but another man's name had been added later and then crossed out. And that other man, I recognized him. He was Ryan's boss. When I saw the name on that prenatal form, I thought I was hallucinating. Mark Davis, regional manager, Ryan's boss of 6 years. The same man who'd come to our house for dinner last Christmas, smiling and telling me I was lucky to have such a hardworking husband. Mark was married. 2 kids. Lived 20 minutes away in a McMansion that probably cost 3 times what ours did. It didn't take long to piece it together. Ryan wasn't the only one sneaking around. Kayla was sleeping with both of them. At first, I didn't know what to do with that information. I was still the betrayed wife, bleeding from inside. But somewhere between rage and disbelief, a darker kind of clarity set in. If Ryan had mocked me for being infertile, if he'd called me dried up and spent our savings on another woman's baby, then I could use this. I started gathering evidence. I downloaded every message thread, screenshot, and email from his cloud backup. I organized them into folders, one for the affair, one for the money transfers, one for my stolen medical records. I even pulled the fertility invoices that showed I'd been paying everything out of pocket while he funneled thousands to his side project. But the part that kept haunting me was the medical information leak. I realized what that meant legally. He'd violated HIPAA laws. He wasn't a doctor, but he'd accessed my private records through our insurance portal and shared them without my consent. That was criminal, so I went to see a lawyer. The lawyer, a calm woman named Patel, read through everything quietly, page by page. Then she said something that made me freeze. If your husband shared your medical data and used joint funds for another relationship, you have grounds for divorce, restitution, and possibly criminal charges. Her next question: do you want to ruin him? I didn't answer right away, but in my mind I saw him grinning as he texted Kayla about my dried-up ovaries. Yes, I wanted to ruin him. Still, I needed to be careful. Ryan wasn't stupid, he was sneaky and calculating, so I played along. I cooked dinner, laughed at his lame jokes, pretended we were healing. Meanwhile, I set up hidden cameras in the living room and synced his iPad to a burner account. And one night the footage came through. He was pacing the living room, phone to his ear, whispering harshly, "You told me it was mine, Kayla, don't screw me over." Then silence. Then his voice again, lower this time. "If Mark finds out we're both done, you hear me, you can't tell him." He slammed the phone down and muttered, "Stupid bitch." I sat in the bedroom, watching from my phone, heart pounding. He thought he was in control. But I knew now he wasn't just cheating. He was lying to 2 women and endangering 2 families. The next morning I walked into work, printed out a folder labeled confidential, and addressed it to Mark Davis, HR department. Inside, I put screenshots of the affair, proof of the financial transfers, and a copy of Kayla's prenatal form. Then I dropped it into the outgoing mail tray. That was the day the real explosion began. After I mailed the confidential folder to Mark's HR, I felt lighter for about an hour. Then the rust returned, that cold, steady thing that tells you half measures won't cut it. This wasn't just about humiliation. He'd weaponized my body, my health, our savings. I needed the kind of payoff that would make him understand the size of what he'd broken. First step, make sure whatever I did would stick. Lawyer Patel told me to document everything and not to touch his accounts. "Don't do anything illegal," she said, like I needed permission. "Let the paper trail and the evidence do the work." It sounded clinical, practical. So I did it her way. I hired a private investigator on a recommendation from a woman at the fertility clinic, a quiet guy named Lewis who smelled like coffee and had a patience I envied. He trailed Ryan for 2 weeks. Dinner dates, the uptown apartment, late-night meetings with Mark at a bar called the Harbor. Lewis got photos of Ryan carrying the diaper bag with our savings receipt inside, Ryan leaving cash envelopes at Kayla's door, and most important, a video of Ryan and Mark arguing outside a restaurant while Kayla watched from the car, hand on her belly like she was making herself a shield. Meanwhile, I started the legal stuff. Patel filed a HIPAA complaint with our insurance provider and the hospital system, listing the times and the device IPs. She prepared divorce papers, requested a temporary restraining order for sole control over the accounts, and warned my husband's company HR that a suit could expose them to liability for fostered workplace misconduct if they didn't act fast. But if law and money were surgical, I wanted public consequences that would sting in the places money couldn't reach. I gave copies of the screenshots to 2 people, Mark's wife, who I tracked down on LinkedIn, and Kayla's obgyn, the office that had first tipped me off. I didn't call to accuse, I called to be factual. "I'm giving you documentation," I told both women. "Decide what you want to do with it." I also drafted a letter to the local paper's investigative reporter, a woman who'd written about workplace affairs before. I didn't send it, not yet. I wanted to time the reveal so everything would collide in one place: HR, home, and the court of public opinion. The plan had to be clean. Once it started, no soft edges. On the home front, I prepared for a confrontation. I planted 2 voice recorders, one in the living room, one in the kitchen, and kept the house like a staged play. I watched his patterns, which drawer he used when he left for work, how he hid receipts in his gym bag. It seemed petty and obsessively small. But those small things built a robust case: receipts, timestamps, the recorded voice where he called Kayla stupid bitch. Those voices didn't lie. Emotionally, I oscillated between a cold businesswoman and someone who wanted to keeningly dismantle the life we'd built. I told myself the cold routine was survival. I slept less. I injected myself at odd hours. One night, I almost called his mother to tell her everything. I didn't. I saved that card for later, because public humiliation hits harder when family discovers it from a neutral source, not a hysterical wife. My exit strategy had 3 pillars, each triggered in sequence: legal, Patel's filings; professional, HR plus Mark's wife; and social, the reporter plus Kayla's office. When all 3 pillars collapsed at once, they'd have nowhere to hide. I rehearsed the moment to myself in the mirror: walk into the house, hand him the divorce papers, watch his face when the restraining order freezes the accounts, watch Mark's company call him in for questioning, watch Kayla's perfect Instagram teardown when she realized she'd been used as a prop. It felt vindictive. It felt necessary. What I didn't plan for, the thing that would make everything tilt again, was something Lewis sent me in a midnight text, an audio clip with a woman's voice I recognized. It wasn't Kayla's voice. It was my husband's mother's voice, and she was saying something that made my stomach drop like it had been cut from beneath me. Lewis texted me the audio file just after midnight. The caption read, "You're going to want to hear this." I sat up in bed, turned the volume down low, and pressed play. At first, all I heard was background noise, traffic, maybe a cafe, then a woman's voice, low and deliberate. I recognized it immediately. It was Ryan's mother, Janet. "You should have told him sooner," she said. "You can't hide something like that forever." A pause, then a younger woman's voice, Kayla. "He said he doesn't want to know. He just wants to believe it's his." Janet sighed. "That's not how this works. I warned you, Ryan doesn't handle the truth well. You saw what he did with her." Then came the line that made my blood run cold. "He needs to think this baby's his. It'll fix him." There was a pause. Kayla whispered, "What if it doesn't?" Janet replied, "Then we'll make sure he never finds out who the real father is." I had to replay that part 3 times. It didn't make sense. "We'll make sure he never finds out who the real father is." What the hell did that mean? Lewis's next message came seconds later. "Looks like Janet and Kayla were in contact before Ryan even knew her. I've got dates, texts, and bank transfers to prove it." I stared at my phone, trying to piece it together. Kayla wasn't just some random coworker. She'd been planted. Over the next 24 hours, Lewis sent me the rest of the puzzle: screenshots from Kayla's Venmo, transfers from Janet's personal account labeled consulting, and help fund. There were phone records showing Janet had called Kayla months before Ryan and Kayla started dating. It was like a second betrayal hiding inside the first. Janet, the same woman who'd cried at our wedding and told me I was the daughter she always wanted, had orchestrated the whole thing. She'd introduced Kayla to Ryan's office manager under the pretense of helping her find a job. Kayla had joined the company 3 weeks later. I went through old texts from Janet. That's when I saw it, the pattern, the constant comments about babies. "Maybe a grandbaby will bring you two closer. Ryan just needs to feel like a father. Some women aren't meant to go through all that science stuff." I'd brushed them off at the time. But now they looked like breadcrumbs leading straight to her plan. Ryan thought he was having an affair out of weakness. But really, he'd been manipulated too by his own mother. And the cruelest part, Kayla wasn't pregnant with either of their children. Lewis confirmed it. "DNA test from a prenatal clinic, different father," he said. "Guy named Eric Johnson, bartender. Met Kayla before she ever worked with Ryan." So the entire thing, the affair, the pregnancy, the betrayal, was built on a lie engineered by his mother to fix her son and preserve the family line. Ryan destroyed me for it. Kayla destroyed her own life. And Janet had pulled every string. It was bigger than cheating now. It was a setup. And the worst part, Janet didn't even seem to feel guilty. Because when I called her, pretending I didn't know, she said calmly, "Honey, sometimes women like you just have to accept when it's time to let go. Ryan deserves to be a father." That's when I knew exactly how my revenge would start. Not with Ryan, not with Kayla, but with her. Janet wasn't just manipulative. She was calculated in a way that made my skin crawl once I finally understood why she did it. After Lewis's report came in, Patel and I met to go over everything. Financial statements, messages, recordings, the Venmo logs. Patel leaned back in her chair when we finished and said, "She didn't do this just to get a grandchild. This feels like control." She was right. I started digging into Janet's life, not out of curiosity, but out of instinct. There's always a reason people like her think they can play God with other people's lives. What I found explained everything, and it was darker than I ever could have guessed. Turns out, Janet had lost her own son years before Ryan was born. He was stillborn at 8 months. It wasn't something Ryan ever talked about. I don't think he even knew. His parents had buried it. But that loss shaped everything. From what I could piece together through old public records, it wrecked her. She became obsessed with family, continuity, bloodlines, passing down the name. When Ryan was born, she treated him like a legacy project instead of a child. The perfect son, the golden boy, the one who'd fix her pain by giving her a grandchild someday. But when he married me, a woman with fertility issues, that fantasy cracked. And Janet doesn't tolerate cracks. She'd been feeding Ryan that poison for years. You need to think about your future. You can't wait too long, you're not getting any younger. But when my test results came back, she saw her nightmare playing out again, her family line ending. So she decided to intervene. Lewis found messages between her and Kayla from almost a year before the affair started. It began as a mentorship, Ryan's mother helping a young woman at the company. But the tone shifted. Janet started hinting, Ryan's wife has some health limitations. He's under a lot of pressure. He deserves a family. She coached Kayla on how to comfort him at work, when to bring up kids, even when to start being more affectionate. She promised Kayla financial help and security for her baby. It was a breeding plan. Janet wanted a grandchild so badly that she engineered an affair, manipulated two vulnerable people, and weaponized my infertility to get it. She turned Ryan into her pawn and Kayla into her incubator. When I realized that, the horror didn't come from the betrayal anymore. It came from how coldly she'd treated human life as a tool. The pregnancy, the affair, my humiliation, all of it was just a means to an end. Janet's own words, from one of the texts Lewis recovered, "It doesn't matter who the father is as long as it's ours in the end." That was her truth. It wasn't about love or family. It was about control, ensuring that her version of legacy lived on, no matter who she had to destroy. When she told me on the phone, "Ryan deserves to be a father," what she really meant was, "I deserve to be a grandmother." And that's when I understood. If I wanted revenge, I couldn't just go after Ryan. He was weak. Kayla was foolish. But Janet, she was the architect. She wanted a legacy. I was about to make sure that the only thing her family name stood for was shame. I didn't want a messy, movie-style takedown. I wanted precision, a slow, clinical unraveling that matched how they'd methodically dismantled my life. So I stuck to the pillars: legal, professional, and social. But the part that tasted the sweetest was watching Janet's empire of control crack, where she kept it safest, in public, among people who respected her. First, Patel filed for divorce, and the HIPAA complaint moved faster than I expected once an investigator saw the pattern. The hospital system opened an internal inquiry. They froze Ryan's access. That alone left him exposed at work, and HR called him in the same week I mailed the confidential folder to Mark's office. Mark's face when HR showed him the prenatal form with his name crossed out was something I'll never forget, equal parts confusion and panic. He tried to spin it, but the photos and timestamps Lewis supplied removed any wiggle room. Then I made 2 strategic calls I'd been saving. The first went to Mark's wife. I left a folder at her doorstep, printed screenshots, bank transfers, voicemail snippets. I didn't expect forgiveness, I expected consequence. She responded exactly as I'd hoped, fury, not tears. Her next move was swift: confront Mark, go to HR and demand answers. Their marriage imploded within days. The second call was the one I'd rehearsed 100 times. Janet's charity board. She'd built a reputation as the compassionate matriarch in 3 nonprofits. I sent anonymous emails to the board members with selective evidence. The Venmo transactions from her account labeled consulting, meeting logs showing she'd arranged Kayla's hire, and the audio clip where she coached Kayla to keep Ryan believing the baby was his. I didn't slander her, I showed receipts. Boards don't tolerate liability. They suspended her pending an independent review. When the board chair called to ask if I had proof, I said nothing. Let them turn over every stone. Let them call her in front of peers who'd praised her integrity for years. The public unraveling hit harder than anything I could have done at home. Her name, so carefully curated, became a headline in the local paper. Neighbors whispered. Fundraising dinners canceled. The woman who once hosted holiday dinners at the McMansion found doors shut. Ryan tried to bargain. He cried, he apologized, he claimed he'd been manipulated. He begged for another chance. I gave him the divorce papers on the porch with a small, flat voice. You broke me and lied about it. We're done. He tried to reach for me, and I stepped back like his touch burned. The restraining order froze joint accounts, and Patel made sure our savings were not funneled to his defense. He lost his job not long after HR concluded their probe. Kayla's story crashed too. Her baby, whose paternity was never Mark's, became a center of scandal. She got the financial help Janet promised, but that help came with strings. When the board cut ties with Janet, Kayla's safety net evaporated. She posted long, pitiful apologies on Instagram that read like a woman trying to reconstruct herself in public. I felt nothing for her by then. She'd been complicit. What I learned through all of it is brutal but simple. Revenge doesn't heal you the way people think. The satisfaction of watching their pedestal crumble was real and sharp, but it didn't replace the quiet losses, missed doctor's appointments, the money spent, the years. The court awarded me compensation for the stolen funds and the invasion of privacy. The judge called Ryan's behavior egregious. The money helped. It didn't fix the scars, but it closed a door. Months later, on a cool morning, I walked past the McMansion. The lights were off. The mailbox held no cards. I felt a long, steady something settle in my chest that was neither triumph nor vengeance. It was relief, edged with a weird, hard clarity. I'd walked through humiliation and come out with my name intact. As for Janet, she called once from an unknown number, voice thin and conspiratorial. I only wanted what was best for the family, she said. I laughed, a short, bitter sound I didn't try to soften. Families don't get to decide what happens to other people's bodies, I told her. She didn't have a reply. When someone treats your life like a problem to be solved, the only mercy you get is the truth, leaving them nowhere to hide. I didn't get the baby I wanted. I didn't get back the years. But I did make sure the people who used me as a tool couldn't do it again, to me or anyone else. And if you're wondering how it felt to watch a legacy crumble, imagine a roof built on rotten beams finally collapsing under its own weight. Cozy, messy, and perfectly inevitable.